So the Saga work weekends are that we're doing monthly are working out quite well. We're getting a lot of the task type stuff done, and helping with the shortage. We still are hoping for more residents, and we do have one more, Josh, who has been up there for, I want to say 6 months, 9 months, something like that, has decided to stay for a while longer, so at least he's committed through the end of next summer. So he'll be taking over some of the duties, and we're hoping for more. So this meeting was more, the emphasis was kind of a report out of what was working and what still needed to be focused on, and the focus is now Kenshin's having conversations with people about eventually coming up and taking over the center. That's the next hurdle to get past. Which the next opportunity that we have. Oh my God, back to Kaiser. But true, it is an opportunity, but it's a unique opportunity in that sense. Not many people are set up to make that kind of commitment and change. So we'll see how that goes. But so far, I've been up there now. But it's going on 3 or 4 months that I've been going up twice a week, just to help work in the office. And stuff has moved online, so it's much easier. I can do a lot more things remotely than I could before, and that's I think some of that's a necessary change. The office procedures are very old and convoluted and need updating desperately. Literally, if someone wants to become a member and they want to join via credit card, you have to enter their information 4 times. Yeah, that was my look. Like, what? Why? Aren't these programs talking to each other? I think they were. That was the reason they purchased these various apps, is they were supposed to be able to talk to each other. They don't. Bottom line. Anyway, so more challenges, more updates. It's coming along. So that was this morning. I only stayed for half of the conversation, so I'll find out what happened the other day, because I left at 9:30 for Kin-Hin, but they were still going when I left. But most of it had gotten to question and answer. So I think the substance of the conversation, or the announcements from Jokai and Tenshin Roshi, were over at that point. I don't know what other questions were asked and answered by the Sangha. So if there's more updates from that, I'll let you know.
Okay. So has any qualified person sort of put their hat in the ring for taking over?
I don't know who Tenshin is talking to, so I don't know the answer to that question. Could be. And there are other models that they're also looking at. They mentioned that they could have a model where they have teachers who rotate through as teachers, which I'm not sure exactly how that would work. Rather than having one abbot, or they may have a main head person or main abbot, but they wouldn't be there teaching all the time. So they're open to different formats, because it's true, I think, worldwide there are fewer people interested in spiritual practice. That's just happening. I think it's because it's part of human evolution, and so they're looking, or people are doing spiritual practice differently than going to specific places, and like to churches or to residential centers. So the practice itself needs to evolve with the rest of the human cultures, but it does seem to be fairly universal that's happening in the more developed countries, that fewer and fewer people are doing spiritual practice. For all religions, it's not just. I think the steepest drop off is with the major religions, Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, but it's also affecting. But Buddhism is the fourth largest. So it's happening with Buddhism as well. And it did happen, it's happened in waves in history as well, because Zen Buddhism has died out almost entirely in India. You can find a little bit still in China, but not much. In Japan, it's practiced in a very unique way, because it's still very much state supported. And in the Americas, it had its heyday during the '60s, the hippie era, when people were looking for alternative religions, and then it has steadily dropped off since. It never increased after that. So it's the numbers anyway. So it's an interesting phenomenon. It's interesting to look at, but anyway, this is where we are. And so I think we have to work with human beings as they are, which is what this practice is all about, trying to make them do the practice the way we want them to. Just, that's never worked. And it has always had to embrace the culture that it's in, and some like Keizan Zenji, who founded Sojiji, who's the second largest monastery in Japan. What he did, Eihiji, founded by Dogen, was up in the mountains, so he basically was in control of how that was run. Sojiji was in the middle of a city center, and so what he did was he took the local cultural events and made them Buddhist, much the way Christians took pagan events and made them Christian, and that's how he got people to come to the temple. That's how Christians got people to come to church. So a very similar tactic. So we're living very much in a online internet AI world. How do we leverage what is the culture to continue to save all sentient beings and to end suffering, which is the only thing we're all about. And, those are the two things we have to do. How we do it has changed over the centuries, and so now we have a new century in which to figure that out.
Just to share something, the one time that I was in Japan, I found a monastery in Tokyo to go sit, and it was a weekday morning, and it was like, I don't know, 6 or 7 a.m. full of people on their way to work or school or wherever.
Yeah.
So this monastery knew that in order to get people to practice, they had to work it into their daily.
Absolutely. Yeah. Zenshudi does that in LA, Little Tokyo. They're the only time they sit in the early morning, so people can do it on the way to work. And they don't have any other regular Zazen program. They do have kind of church, because they have, their Zen is very small, so very few people actually do Zazen. But the temple itself has pews like a regular church, so they have but they do services. Most of them are memorial services, because in Japan, Buddhism is a funeral parlor. And that, so the culturally Japanese still treat Buddhism much that same way, even here. But that's just how the culture operates. So Buddhism has learned to operate in that realm. Anyway, any questions about the transition before I move on? Okay. Yeah.
They settled on are they thinking about a regular schedule for next year? They put out the bookmark, the title of the month this year with all the sessions that they do on it.
Yeah, interesting. I just had a discussion with Jokai Roshi, not yesterday, but last Friday when I was there, or last Thursday I went a week ago. Was about the schedule for next year, and the answer was no, we haven't done the schedule for next year. So because the transition, they're thinking of cutting back on a lot of the rental groups, but trying to decide which ones and when they're going to be scheduled, because those get scheduled first, and then sessions and beginner's mind sessions get scheduled around those, because those bring in money. So that's what they're working on right now. So they've got commitment from a couple of the big groups, but even those big groups are running into funding issues. So some of them for DEI, though that funding's been cut because a couple of them were two of them are schools, USC and Chapman. USC has canceled because that funding got cut. And Chapman is still scheduled, so we'll see. Chapman's a private school, well, so is USC. But I think Chapman is less dependent on federal funding than USC is. So we'll see. We're in a different place. So we're trying to figure out what that is and how to live in it. So it's coming. So the only thing that's been scheduled for next year, I believe the only thing that's on the calendar, as I recall looking at it yesterday, the April session is scheduled, which is the opening, the beginning of the training period. Nothing else is on the calendar yet. There probably will be in the next couple of weeks. So then we'll send that out. Okay. Yeah. All right. Ready for this? This is probably the most famous koan, the most famous encounter that is talked about, because this dialogue, which may or may not be apocryphal, and even Aiken Roshi in his book says, don't be so literal about this, because the characters in this dialogue may or may not exist, but they're archetypal in a way, and this is what started the lineage in China. So very important transition of Zen Buddhism from India to China. So Zen, and it was, dhyana in Sanskrit, chana in Chinese, which got shortened to chan. The same characters read zena in Japanese, which got shortened to zen. That's how we get that word. It's where it comes from, dhyana meaning meditation, specifically seated silent meditation is what that word means. So it's a specific type of meditation, unlike the mantra chanting or the other type of chanting. There are tons of forms of meditation. Buddhism had already been in China for 400 years at this point, so it was well established as known. But this is the Theravadan forms of it were there. Emperor Wu was a Buddhist and an ordained priest himself, and had bragging rights about helping that evolution with. But so Zen was, as it was it was kind of a late development in India as well. So it's later getting to China than other forms of Buddhism. But Zen arrives. Same thing happened in Japan, because Buddhism had long, for several hundred years, had been in Japan before Dogen came back from China to establish the Zen school. So Zen tends to lag historically, and maybe it needs to. Maybe Buddhism needs to have been established in some other way in order for Zen to take root, because people need something to believe in. So Theravada Zen gives you the Pure Land, and a lot of philosophical and things to hang on to, and Zen comes along and takes that all away. And leaves you with emptiness. And then you're like, now what? Anyway, this is Bodhidharma Puts the Mind to Rest, case 41, Bhuvan main case. Bodhidharma sat facing the wall. The second patriarch, standing in the snow, cut off his arm and said, if you read the Aiken Roshi edition, it's cut off his hand. So just in case, I don't know who has what edition, which book, but so it's same koan, different body part, or bigger body part. Second patriarch is standing in the snow, cut off his arm, and said, your disciple's mind is not yet at peace. I beg you, master, give it rest. Bodhidharma said, bring your mind to me, and I will put it to rest. The patriarch said, I have searched for the mind, but have never been able to find it. Bodhidharma said, I have finished putting it to rest for you. Bhuvan's commentary. The broken-toothed old barbarian came thousands of miles across the sea with an active spirit. It can rightly be said that he raised waves where there was no wind. In later life, he obtained one disciple, but even he was crippled in his six senses. Ha! The fools do not even know 4 characters. The verse. Coming from the west and pointing directly to it. All the trouble comes from the transmission. The one who disturbs the monasteries is originally you. So I kind of like the way Yamada Roshi kind of ends his last of his commentary. He talks about how annoying and Buddhism is with all of its sitting and all of its koans and all of its following its breath. So it was a disruptor to the status quo of Buddhism. So that is what the verse is pointing to. A bit of history: Bodhidharma, 3rd son of the king of Ceylon in that day. What became Ceylon? I'm not sure it was called Ceylon at that time. So royalty, a privilege. Studied with Hanyatara, the most famous Buddhist teacher in India at that time. There's a lot of doubt about who Bodhidharma was. The Bodhidharma that was in India may not have been the same Bodhidharma that ended up in China, because it took several years. So Hanyatara's instructions, he had studied with Hanyatara for 20, 30 years, something around that. So no one talks about how old he was when he started with Hanyatara, but even if he had just been born, he's still 20, 30 years old at this point. Hanyatara instructs him, after he receives transmission, wait 60 years and then go to China. So let's just start with a short side of that. So he's born into Buddhism, studies with Hanyatara. He's 20 now. 60 years from that is 80. It takes several years to take a boat from India to China. Not an easy route. So at minimum, which is probably not even possible, he's 80 by the time he gets to China. He encounters Emperor Wu, and I love the description of he pours dirty water over over his majesty. And then he escapes, crosses the Yellow River on a blade of grass, as the story goes, and he sits at, depending on which story you read, he either goes to Shaolin or he finds a deserted temple and it becomes Shaolin, or Shorinji in Japanese. And he sits facing the wall for 9 years. That's before Master Eka shows up and is standing in the snow. And he had a couple of attendants that would bring him food. They tried to poison him 8 times. This time, the reason he's called the broken tooth or snaggletooth barbarian was apparently he tested one of the teas that was brought to him by these 2 assassins, and it literally broke his teeth. And another story, which is not in the book, he put the food down or poured the tea out on a rock, and the rock exploded. So these people seriously wanted him gone. They wanted to unalive him in no uncertain ways. So this was, no wonder he's not quite, hospitable to someone sitting outside his door. It's like, okay, you want to kill me too? What? Why? Did you expect me to invite you in? But Eka stands there, and it's snowing. So he stands there until the snow gets up to his knees. And finally, Bodhidharma turns around and says, what? Why are you standing out there in the snow? So he finally invites him in, and Eka says, please, master, open the Dharma gates and save all sentient beings. Doesn't ask for himself. He's saying, you have this mastery, so please save all sentient beings. Bodhidharma proceeds to tell him, you are inferior. Your pitiful little efforts will not suffice. Go away. Master Eka goes away, comes back, and basically continues. I guess the insistence is that he does see him. He begins to teach him, but doesn't let him in. So there is this kind of conversation that takes place for a while, and finally Master Eka really wanted more. He's standing there in the sun. He won't accept him as a disciple, although he calls himself as a disciple. And he stands there and he says is standing, he's desperate and stands there long enough for the snow to pile up. So this conversation didn't take place all at once. It was, he's standing there. Obviously, it took a while for the snow to pile up, so he's standing there for a while. Then he says, "My mind is not at peace. Can you please put it to rest?" And Bodhidharma says, "Go find your mind. Bring it back." So he leaves and he goes in search of his mind. Obviously, a futile attempt. He comes back and says, "Can't find it." And Bodhi is like, "Okay. Instead of me having to tell you that you're not going to find your mind, I've had you go learn that yourself. And now that you found it, I've done my job. Your mind is now at rest." So beware of any master that says they are going to do something for you. So I always compare this story to the story with the Buddha, with the woman who had the dead child and was desperate, and thought the Buddha would perform this miracle. So she's carrying this dead, probably very smelly child to see the Buddha, and the Buddha takes one look at her and says, "Go find me 2 mustard seeds." And mustard seed, those of you who cook know how large mustard seeds are. They are tiny, tiny little things. "Find me 2 mustard seeds from any house that has never seen death, and then I will raise your child back to life." So of course there was no house anywhere that had ever seen death. So it took that effort for her to figure that out. But she wouldn't have listened otherwise. And so the same thing with Master Eka. And Bodhidharma said, "You have no mind, and there's no you to find." If he had just said that out there, he wouldn't have understood or wouldn't have listened. He had to learn it himself. That's the effort that we put in. I mean, to do this practice, it doesn't require any practice. To do the striving, that doesn't require any striving. We've got to do the striving. We've got to do the work. We've got to do the practice in order to get to that point, in order to learn it. This is what establishes the Mahayana school. This is the beginning of that. Directly, you have to do the work in order to realize that you already had it all along. Did not the Wizard of Oz tell us this? The Cowardly Lion obviously had courage. The Tin Man had a heart. And what was the third one? Scarecrow. What was his problem?
Right.
Mind.
Right.
That's right. So we continue to pursue these things and look for things that we already have. That's already there. But in order to find out that we already have them, we have to do that. So there is this constant, what's the word I love? This conundrum we feel we have to solve because we think we don't have it. In order to find out that we do, we have to look for it. And unfortunately, that looking usually takes place in forms of looking outside. It's like, oh, it's out there somewhere. It's in some spiritual practice. It's in some book. It's in something out there that will lead. And a lot of those books are good. They're not bad. They will lead you to that understanding. But the understanding is still something that you have to get yourself. That you have to directly experience yourself. And we all know that experience. It's like, man, wow. We know if something hits you, it's like, okay, I did all that work, and I had to do all that work to come back home, to come back to yourself, to come back to your true self, which has been there the entire time. But you can't blame people. I mean, and this is, people, cultures, societies, groups invest a lot of money in distracting you. Not just, this is not new to the 21st century, from really looking at your true self. because your true self will most likely, see through the lies that your culture is perpetuating, in order that they want you to believe, because they want you to see life their way. And so people, even politicians especially, invest in convincing you that things are different, are the way they want you to see it. And we have billions and billions and billions of dollars being spent to distract us from truly being with ourselves, stopping long enough and just sitting quietly with no distractions, and that's what facing the wall is. No distractions, and just being who your true self, and really directly experiencing your true self. Because with that wall in front of you, and I love Aiken Roshi says, anything can become your wall, because he sat in front, I can't remember which teacher he was working with, he sat in front of he was at a teacher's house, and he sat in front of his bookcase. And of course, as a result of sitting in front of the bookcase, he memorized all the titles. But it was still his wall. His titles didn't change because the books didn't move. So wall's still there. He still had to be the only person who's sitting there. The only experience he's having is the experience of himself sitting there facing himself, and that's it. That's all. It sounds easy. I tell people whenever I teach ZMI these days, I'm going, the instructions I'm about to give you are very easy to do. It's maintaining them that is very hard to do, and it is in the maintenance of this practice over time that you reap the benefits of it. And then I skipped the part about there are no benefits, because I want to get them in first. But the only benefit is what you already have. You are enough. And Bodhidharma was cruel. What did he tell him exactly? Should have underlined it. Because it was, Anyway, I'll find it when I'm not looking for it. Yeah, but the story. So, for me, it does not matter whether or not there are aspects of the story that are probably exaggerated. It was common and I went through this period of time when I could not see enough Yakuza movies. And in every single, how do you pronounce it? Yakuza? Somebody, if not several people, out of devotion to the head Yakuza, cut off their finger, their small finger, just to, as a signal that they were serious about, the promises they were making. I'm going ahead. So cutting off of body parts is probably not uncommon. It may not have been, but the other story is that Master Eka had was a soldier and had lost his arm in war, so his arm was already missing, and he was using it as a metaphor. So he's, I've given my life, I've given my arm in war so that I can do this practice. And then I had not heard, Aiken Moshe's version that it was a hand. So I'd always thought it was the arm. So this was new to me, because when I was studying this koan, I didn't read that version. But hand, arm, he was giving a vital part of himself, which is really what it takes. You don't have to cut it off, but you're giving, because the only thing you bring to this practice is yourself, and you come in a body. So it is your body that is giving of itself to do this practice. It's a very physical practice. It looks like it's peaceful and calm, and you all know that it's not. But you bring your body to the cushion to do the sitting, and to take care of what comes up in that sitting. And so it's no little thing, no trivial thing, to demonstrate that devotion by cutting off part of your body, because you're cutting off your your willingness to participate in something that will distract you. You could be doing anything else. Mimosas, it's it's 11 o'clock. You could be. But here you are, sitting here, doing this work, putting in the effort, doing this, the wall gazing, as they called Bodhidharma. It was, this wall gazing meditation is what it became known as before it became known as Zen. So yeah, an important, pivotal, important. So this is 6th century, 500 something. So he arrived allegedly in China in 520 and died in 536. So 16 years to take care of the passing this dharma on to Master Eka, who then that's the, I'm assuming is that mid Tang or is that beginning of the Tang dynasty? I can't remember the years for the Tang. Beginning of the Tang dynasty. So Buddhism flourishes, Zen Buddhism flourishes during the Tang dynasty, and this was the very beginning of it. So and Emperor Wu, of course, that encounter was, in English she quotes it quite well. I think it bears repeating because it does touch on really what the practice is really all about. Because this is the ground base for Mahayana Buddhism. The emperor asks, I have endowed temples and authorized ordinations. What is my merit? Bodhidharma says, no merit at all. The emperor asks, what is the first principle of the holy teaching? Bodhidharma says, vast emptiness, nothing holy. And then the emperor says, who is this confronting me? Bodhidharma answers, I don't know. So these ideas that there's no reward, there's no pure land, there's nothing to get as a result of doing this practice is established in this conversation. The fact that this emptiness is really the ground base of everything, that there is nothing locally real. And there's nothing holy because there's nothing outside of the practice. There's no separation between what's holy practice and non-holy practice or good practice or bad practice. It's your life. It's all of your life. And without any separation, without any dualistic considerations at all. Because there was tons, if you read the Theravada, not that these are bad teachings, because they're wonderful, it's what got us here. Tons of this good and bad and pure land and non-pure land and devils and angels and all kinds of things. And they're very typically, ground in dualistic beliefs. But out of that comes Zen. And the last one is probably the most important one. Who is this confronting me? I don't know. In other words, there is no I for me to know, to tell you who I am. This no I, very difficult conversation. And even today, as I listen to a lot of the modern, physicists who are talking about consciousness, cannot have to admit that there is no I. This I that we have is completely made up. We make that up. There's no I that is separate from all of us. There's no I that is independent from everything else around you. And then of course they take that into there's no free will and all that stuff, and who knows. So it gets deep really quickly. So this no I was not new, because it had been around for, you can find it in the Upanishads of Hindu practice. It's there. But the practice of it, of this no I, really didn't start to take root. And you also find it early on in early Chinese, in Taoism especially, and also in Confucianism. There's no I there either. But it didn't become a way of practicing, a way of living, until it hits Zen. And Zen, it's difficult to separate Zen and Taoism and Confucianism. It's all merged, married, indecipherable at this point. At that point, it was still 400 years on, but it's now since had another 1,000 years to do that. So it's there's no going back. There's no Zen without Taoism, no Zen without Confucianism, no Zen without Hinduism, Jainism. All of that is mixed in because it's not possible. Zen does not have the capacity to separate because that's what it's all about. Thank the gods. And Buddha said it to begin with. It took several hundred years for it to catch on, but it's all beings, nothing left out, nothing excluded, nothing separated. All beings have the wisdom of the Tathagata. And then we've got this inverted thinking. There's lots of inverted thinking going on, and which is why we come back to the cushion to uninvert our thinking on a regular basis because it gets inverted very quickly. So that's the important aspect that I see from this story. Whether these people are real or not, it's the tradition. It is that this pivotal point, very important historical pivotal point of Zen having been late to come to being established in India, now comes 400 years after Buddhism established in China and established itself in rather confrontational ways in China, flourishes through the Tang Dynasty, a couple hundred years. Then there were emperors who didn't like it so much, and here we are today. So that question of why Bodhidharma came from the West, there are several koans that ask that same question, and each time that question is asked, the answer is different because the answer can only come from right here, right now, where you are. So you are the result of Bodhidharma coming from the West. You are Bodhidharma coming from the West. So that's your job description for this week. Questions, comments, criticisms?
I know a lot of times the answer to that question in some of what I've read is just a whack on the head.
Yeah. Pay attention, it's you, dude. Yeah. That's one of the answers. One of the many answers. Yeah. Important question. Important realization. So what do we do with this? Yeah.
Just for fun.
Just for fun.
Everything is so exaggerated.
Yeah.
2 feet of snow, a blade of grass, an arm. It's all got to be metaphorical, in a way. I mean, they can't. I mean, the point is, he came back, he couldn't find his mind. There you go.
Yeah.
That was my big build-up for. There you go.
Yeah.
And, I can see, if there's no mind, then the blade of grass would be entirely sufficient to float across the river.
Yeah.
In the sense that, there was nothing to carry across.
Yeah.
So I can see how I can work all that stuff out. Yeah, it takes a long time of suffering, for 16 hours of snow to build up. Our face a wall for 9 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm going to go back to facing a wall. We did it back at the Zen Center in the 70s, late 60s, early 70s.
Yeah, I think they still do it at CCLA.
And I got a lot more accomplished facing the wall than I did looking at the girls.
And I guess I still face my altar at home, so I do face it. It is a wall because the altar is up here, the cabinet's right in front of me. So
but it's unbelievable, but in a way, there's some great points made through those hyperbole.
Yeah. So Are these grand gestures? Yes. Did they actually happen? Who knows? It got your attention. Which is, the key of advertising. If this was, would this work as a Zen commercial, for people who like violence, this would definitely, would get your attention. Hopefully, you wouldn't want someone to emulate that, but you get the point of the metaphor. So it's, I don't know. I think the point is, in order to get to really experiencing no mind, you have to go through a lot, because we think we have a mind. And, and our mind is rather insistent that it's there. Yeah. And that's not going to very easily give itself up. So the work that it takes the work. You have to do the work in order to get to that point. So for standing in the snow, cutting off your arm, and I mean the story gets rather graphic. He literally took out his sword, and the sword must have been sharp enough, for him to, in one swipe. And so you feel that it's visceral. You can get there. So if they've got you with that part of the story, you're going to stick around for the rest. So I grant them, kudos on the effective advertising, and getting, because that's the point. You get their attention, because it's nothing to do with what you're selling. A lot of the times, commercials that are really good, by the time I'm done watching the commercial, I have no idea what they were selling.
All right.
But it, held my attention. So it's got your attention, and it's got not only your attention, but even metaphorically, it's striking enough that you're like, okay, even if this isn't real, why did we have to go there? What was the reason? And I think it had to be, that severe, that strong, in order to be able to get to this point of no mind, of no I. That's how much work it takes. And so to recognize that, it's like, okay, now I make a decision. Is this where I want to be? Is this what I want to do? Does this have value for me? If you can, because this is one of the first stories, at least for me, one of the first stories that really grabbed me. When I first started, reading Zen literature, and because I can't remember who. I think it may have been Yogan, because you know how Yogan was with telling stories. He was a evangelist Buddhist. So in Yogan would just dramatize, and so I think the first time I heard it, after this very dramatic way of telling the story, it was like, okay, wow, what is that? And so it sucks you in to the question, what is this, and is this something I want? And if it isn't something you want, then get up and leave, go someplace else, do some other practice. Because I think this was the first calling that made me realize, okay, this is not just about finding peace. This is some work. Then I was really hooked. I was like, okay, this is going to require my attention, my energy, my effort on my part to actually do this practice. Because if you're hearing, I can't remember who said it. If you're here just pissing around the edges of Buddhism, I can't remember who said that, but I was like, how rude. And I thought, okay, am I going to continue just pissing around the edges of Buddhism? Because you can do that and be fine. And they call it Buddhism. If you're here just to find peace and tranquility, Zazen will give that. You can get that from Zazen. However, there's more. If you want to do the work, but you don't have to. You can just come for the peace and tranquility and then leave.
Yeah, I mean, it has to do with what are you doing when you're sitting by yourself, with yourself, we had one guest teacher many years back at the, I guess the church on Pacific. And I mean, he was a teacher from Hawaii.
Oh, yeah.
He said,
Yeah.
he told his teacher one time, I've seen many dirty movies in your movie theater, meaning that, he was like spending his time on the cushion, kind of having fantasies about this, that, and the other thing. And the teacher said, well, if that's the way you want to spend your time. And that woke him up. He said,
yeah.
Right. I mean, it's all up to me. I'm not doing this, for some kind of weird kind of time to myself and do other things. But I think about that, think about, well, what do you want to do? What are you doing? Are you using this time to really be still and experience that, or is your mind drifting? So it's up to you.
It is. And the more important question is, how do you want to live your life?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's what I ultimately came to when I actually had the audacity to go into Tenshin Roshi and say, I want to apprentice with you, not because I don't want to run a Zen center, I don't want to be in any sort of Zen groups. I just want to live my best life. And then a week later, he puts me in charge of Long Beach.
What a joy it's been.
It's like,
We are your best one.
Be careful what you ask for. You'll get it. All right.
Simply told me you didn't want to do that.
I did. I did. I thought I was clear, but you just laughed. Anything from Zoomers, Steve, Don?
No, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Don.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we hear you.
When you were talking about this idea of to have the direct experience of the true self, you have to sacrifice something. It almost seems it's almost like an offering to something. Like almost, I guess you could even say it's an offering to the direct experience. You could even say, would you agree with that? Because you are, right? You could be doing lots of other things. Like I could be sitting watching a movie, I could be doing this, I could be doing that, but the choice in the fact that you're giving your awareness to this direct experience. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely, yes. Yeah, well put.
Thank you.
Yeah, okay. Okay. Anything else before we close? You'll need the bell, Mr. Simon. Sorry about that.